Hey guys, it's Lotus and welcome back to another video. Today, we're going to continue on with our read-along of Urha. Let's jump right in. Chapter 50. This venerable one likes you. Ooh. As someone who cherished weapons, this kind of scene made Chuaning so angry he couldn't even speak. He saw a moron. Under the flowering tree not too far away, Moran summoned Jiangui. The size of a holy weapon could be changed at will. Most people like to make their weapon bigger and more impressive looking, or at least keep it at its normal size as Chuaning did. But Moran had turned Jiangui tiny, about the length and width of a cord for tying here, its leaves minuscule, the dignified holy weapon looking absolutely pitiful. People had different spiritual energies. Tianwen glowed golden when Chuaning poured his spiritual energy in, but Jiangui glowed scarlet. So, leaves aside, Jiangui looked just like a red string of fate. Shumei, tie this on your hand. I want to see if Jiangui has the same power as Tianwen to coax the truth out of people. You want to test it on me? Moran smiled. Yup, 'cause I'm the closest with you, and I know you'd never lie to me. Shumei was still hesitant. That's true, but... I won't say anything tricky, but if you don't believe me, let's pinky swear, he said, sticking out his pinky. Shumei didn't know whether to laugh or cry. How old are you already? Isn't that a little too childish? Come on, let's pinky swear. If it's fine at 8, then it's fine at 18. 882. Oh, 88 too. Nothing childish about it. Moran grabbed Shumei's right hand and pried his pinky out with a cheeky grin. Shumei, caught between getting mad and laughing at his antics, could only go along with it in the end. But, unexpectedly, instead of hooking their pinkies together, Moran grinned, eyes becoming like crescents. Jiangui, time to get to work. Jiangui zoomed faster than lightning, and in a flash had tied itself around Shumei's pinky, with its other end around Moran's. He's trying to recreate his own red string of fate. The handsome young man laughed like a sly fox that had schemed its way into ascension. He said happily, framed with dimples, "Congrats, you fell for it." Shumei really didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You, hurry up and let go. Later, Moran grinned. Just a couple of questions first. Truth be told, Moran had been feeling uneasy ever since that episode at Jinchang Lake, when he got ever yearning and Shumei wasn't able to open the box. Even though Shumei was wearing gloves at the time and didn't directly open the box, Moran just couldn't shake his doubts. What's more, it was Chuaning who opened the box in the end. Chuaning. How was it possible? So, Moran decided that the box must have been broken. But he wanted to use Jiangui to confirm it, just to make sure. He was absolutely certain in his feelings for Shumei, but he was worried that maybe he didn't have the same weight in Shumei's heart. As for that confession at Jinchang Lake, he couldn't be sure that he didn't imagine it. Shumei had a gentle temperament and was nice to everyone, unlike that Chuaning, with a sullen face day in day out like everyone else owed him something, totally unlikable. Ta Xianjun might be a crude person, but when it came to his heart's desire, he would dwell on it for so long that he tripped over his own thoughts. First off, Moran's heart was filled with anxiety, but he kept grinning and feigning casualness. He decided to toss out a couple of easy, non-consequential questions first as padding. What do you think of Shui Meng? A prickling sting on his finger, and Shumei fessed up. The young master is a good person, but he's too straightforward. Sometimes intolerably tactless. Moran burst out laughing, clapping in glee. Eh? Even you can get fed up with him? Haha, understandable. He's way too annoying. Shumei turned red. Don't be so loud. What if the young master hears? Okay. Moran grinned. But it makes me happy when you badmouth him. Shumei, ... Moran continued. And what do you think about Shizun? Shizun is good too, just his temper is a little... Shumei seemed like he really didn't want to critique Chuaning, but he was bound by Jiangui, so he bit his lip for a while, but still ended up having to say, "His temper is a little short." Haha, a little short? More like ridiculously short. Gets mad every other day and won't even admit to being mad. He's a bigger handful than the Empress herself. Chua Ning, standing in the corner, who could hear every single word they were saying. ... Moran wondered, if you know about Shizun's bad temper, then why did you still pick him to study under? Shimei said, "Shizun is cold on the outside, but actually kind on the inside. I'm not as naturally gifted as others, but he never minds if I'm slow on the uptake. He said everyone deserves to learn, and since I'm no good at combat, he taught me healing instead. He's truly very nice to me." Moran, originally quite gleeful, grew quiet upon hearing this, the grin disappearing off his face. A while passed before he said, "When has he ever been nice to you? All he did was teach you some techniques, maybe occasionally take care of you. That's only to be expected from any master." "That's different." Moran grew annoyed, cheeks puffing out. "Anyway, he's no good to you. Whatever he does for you, I can do it too." Shimei stopped talking. In the awkward silence that followed, Moran slowly quelled the flames in his heart. Seeing Shimei looking wordlessly downward filled him with guilt, and he quietly whispered, "Sorry." "It's all right." But a short moment later, Shimei suddenly said, "Once, some years ago, before you came to Shisheng Peak, I was walking along a path when it suddenly started storming. I wasn't a disciple under Shizun yet at the time. I bumped into him while running in the rain. He was holding a red oil paper umbrella and, seeing my pitiful state, offered to share it with me. I had heard of his cold reputation, so I was very nervous walking by his side." "And then?" Shimei wore a soft expression. "Then? Then we didn't speak a single word the entire time." Moran nodded. "He's such a stuffy person. What is there even to say to him?" "Yes." Shimei smiled a little. "Shizun doesn't talk much. But when he walked me to the door and I turned to thank him, I saw that his right shoulder was completely drenched. I was walking to his left and didn't get rained on at all." Moran, ... "It was a small umbrella, really only big enough for one person, and he used most of it to cover me. I watched him walk away in the rain, and then, as soon as I got back to my room, I wrote a letter of intent asking him to accept me as a disciple." "That's enough," Moran suddenly said. "You're way too soft-hearted. If you keep going, I'll feel like you're too pitiful." Shimei said softly, "Aran, don't you feel like Shizun is the one who's pitiful? He only has a small umbrella because he's always alone. No one wants to walk with him. That's why, even if Shizun's a little strict with me sometimes, or scolds me a little much sometimes, I don't mind, because I remember his drenched shoulder." Moran said nothing, the tip of his nose a little red, his heart a little forlorn. It was a hazy sort of forlorn feeling, and he wasn't even sure whom it was for. "Aran, let me ask you something." Go ahead." "Do you dislike Shizun?" Moran paused. Or, in other words, you don't like him, right?" For some reason, Shimei's usually gentle and serene gaze seemed somewhat sharp when he asked this. Moran, caught off guard, found himself suddenly speechless. In his daze, Moran neither nodded nor shook his head. A long while passed before he forced a smile onto his face. Aren't I supposed to be the one asking the questions here? Can't just let you turn it around on me like that." Shimei didn't miss the fact that Moran just dodged the question, but he didn't force the issue, smiling. "I was just wondering. Don't take it to heart." Moran calmed his emotions and looked up through his lashes at Shimei's face, no less beautiful than the bright moon in the sky. He had planned to ask Shimei if he liked himself for the third question, but the exchange just now left his heart heavy. Moran was quiet for a bit, lips pressed together, before abruptly saying, "He's just my Shizun, nothing more than that. Liking or not is irrelevant." Hearing these words where he stood in the shadows, Chuaning's eyelashes quivered slightly, like the wings of an injured butterfly. "Oh no, poor Shizun! Oh no! Moran doesn't know what he's saying, he's just dumb. You have to wait for him to grow up a little bit, okay?" Even though deep in his heart he already knew this, to hear it confirmed like this still made his body feel so light it might float away, and his heart so heavy it might sink into the sea. Chuaning felt cold. Maybe autumn had come early this year. Moran and Shinmei were still talking in the distance. He closed his eyes, the light nausea that had been coming and going lately washing over him once again. Suddenly feeling exhausted, he turned to leave. But he had only taken a few steps when the autumn wind carried Moran's voice faintly over. He stopped walking despite himself. Moran was asking Shinmei his third question. Well, you've given your thoughts on Xuemeng and Shizun. Do me next. He tried to sound as nonchalant as he could, and very carefully, almost pathetically asked, Shinmei, what do you think about me? Shinmei was quiet. Jiangui indeed seemed to have the same interrogation ability as Tianwen. Shinmei refused to answer, so Jiangui's scarlet radiance grew brighter where it was wound around Shinmei's finger. Shinmei frowned a little. Ow! Just say something! Moran's heart ached for him, but this question had burrowed so deeply into his heart, this life and last, that it had practically become his personal demon, so he persisted. What do you think of me? Shinmei shook his head and closed his eyes, as if in a great deal of pain, long lashes trembling and sweat gathering on his forehead. Moran sighed, unable to bear hurting him like this. Forget it. He was just about to remove Jiangui when Shinmei reached the limit of his endurance, and, face pale, said hoarsely, I think you're great. Moran's eyes widened. Shinmei's face went from pale to red very quickly, as if vexed. He looked down, lashes lowered, and dared not look at Moran. Jiangui turned into specks of glimmering red light that fluttered like the petals of ravaged flowers back into Moran's palm. With his head lowered, Moran couldn't help letting out a quiet chuckle, and when he looked back up at Shinmei, his face was warm like the first bloom of spring. There was a lazy smile in his voice, but his eyes were a little wet as he said, I'm glad. Thank you. I think you're really great too. I already said it to you at Jincheng Lake, but since you don't remember any of it, I want to say it again. You're really so likable. He didn't specify what kind of like, but Shinmei still blushed all the way to his neck and couldn't find any words. Moran stared at him with deep inky eyes that shone with a clear bright light, like an ocean filled with stars, like gentle waves in the night sky. I want to treat you right. I want to make you happy. Shinmei wasn't dense, and Moran's meaning was written clearly all over his expression. Shinmei couldn't help but lower his head. Moran's heart quivered, and he raised his hand to stroke Shinmei's hair. But before he could even get close, there was a sudden flash of sharp golden light, and a lash of vine struck Moran right on the face with an audible crack. Oof. Right across the face. Ah! Feeling the sting, Moran turned around in shock. Chuaning stood in front of the walls, white with green eaves, pristine robes paler than snow, and one hand held behind his back, staring coldly at them. Tianwen coiled on the ground like a hissing snake, willow leaves rustling, golden light coursing along its length with the occasional spark. Shinmei startled. Shizun! Moran holding his face. Shizun. So what if he was loathed? So what if he wasn't liked? Another person might cry miserably, but Chuaning? Cry? Ridiculous. Of course he'd deliver a beating instead. Chuaning's expression was frosty. He walked over slowly, voice frozen over. Slacking off from training to chatter instead. Mo Wei Yu, you think you're so impressive just because you got the last holy weapon? You think you're all-powerful and invincible now? Aren't you just so relaxed and carefree? Shizun, I was just... Chuaning glared. Moran shut up. Shi Mingjing, spar with me. Mo Wei Yu. He paused, then said resentfully, go practice. If you can't hold out for at least 10 moves against me later, then go back and copy the book of meditation techniques 300 times as punishment. Now get lost. 10 moves? He might as well just go and start copying now. Oh, that was the end of chapter 50. Okay. So, okay, so Moran decided to test out his Jiangui's ability on Shinmei. He decided to ask Shinmei some truth or dare, not truth or dare, some truth questions about his thoughts on Shuema and Shizun. And Shimei really values Shizun's opinion and really looks up to him. He really idolizes and respects Chuaning, which, you know, I really appreciate because Shuema idol worships Chuaning almost to a fault. Shimei knows when Shizun is doing something that's not good for him and knows when to kind of like disagree, but also really respects Shizun as well. Now, what is surprising and suspicious is why would Shimei refuse to answer Moran's question when he asked him, "What do you think about me?" Why did he let himself get shocked by Jiangui before he finally said a response? Why? I mean, I guess, is it because, does he like Moran back? Is he embarrassed to say? Also, what was up with him asking Moran if he liked Shizun? Does Shimei mayhaps have a crush on Chuaning as well? One can hope. I love love triangles, so if Shimei had a bit of a crush on Shizun as well, I wouldn't mind. Although we do know that endgame is Ranwan, Moran, and Chuaning, so even if Shimei does like Chuaning, he doesn't really have a chance with him. But yeah, and then of course Chuaning overheard them talking, and he heard that Moran doesn't like him. So of course he's sad and embarrassed and humiliated, but instead of crying, he whips Moran across the face with his tianwen. Violence first. Shizun's like, "I only know violence. Emotions are nothing." So yeah, let's see what happens in the next chapter, shall we? Okay. Chapter 51. This venerable one, Shizun. Haha. Oh, what's with the title? Okay. For the next 3 days, Chuaning was even more sullen than usual. His temper even worse. Resentment was written clearly all over Yu Heng Elder's features, and a haze of miasma followed wherever he went. The disciples scattered like prey animals at the mere sight of him. Even Xue Zhengyang dared not talk to him, too much for fear of his murderous aura. Chuaning didn't want to admit that he had any untoward feelings for Moran, but seeing his two disciples rendezvousing by the training dummies and acting so affectionate, he simply couldn't help the rage that flared up and the sour feeling that flooded his chest. So he was jealous. He felt that, oh, and disgusted. He was disgusted, not just at others, but more so at himself. He and Mo Wei-yu were master and disciple, nothing more. How was it any of his business whom Moran liked to stick to, whom he wanted to be involved with? What right did he have to wave his willow vine around just because he didn't like what he saw? If he liked someone, liked being near someone, what's that got to do with you? Did it inconvenience you in any way? Chuaning, how are you this pathetically petty, and pitiful? Anyway, backing up 1,000 steps, so what if he felt unspeakable longing toward Moran? He had his pride and plenty of self-restraint, more than enough to keep his feelings under control, more than enough to suppress that terrifying longing for however long it takes to suffocate it. No one will ever know of this unsightly affection of his. Nothing will remain but the brocade pouch of the 2 locks, with the 2 locks of hair inside. Oh, that's the brocade pouch they got during the corpse wedding. Okay, oh, he still has that. I wonder if yeah. I wonder if that's gonna come into play later. Will that make a reappearance later? I wonder. Moran won't know about his feelings, just like he will never know that, at the bottom of Jinchang Lake, the one who endured searing agony to save him wasn't Shimei, but himself. But what was this feeling? Is it jealousy? The mere thought made Chuaning choke. For months after that, he tried to avoid Moran as much as possible, minimizing all interactions outside of the routine instructions in cultivation and training. Time flew by, and it was nearly the end of the year before anyone knew it. One day, as Chuaning was returning from a trip down the mountain to suppress monsters, it started snowing just as he got to the front gates. Shisheng Peak quickly became covered in a veil of silver. Chuaning was no good with the cold. Tugging his robes closer for warmth, he walked briskly toward Loyalty Hall. A hearty fire warmed the inside of the hall, firewood crackling inside the copper basin. Chuaning came to report in with Shui Zhengyang, but the sect leader was nowhere to be seen. Instead, he bumped into Moran. There was no one else at Loyalty Hall. This was the first time Chuaning had been alone with him in many months, and he couldn't help feeling a little awkward. What's more, this was where that absurd dream took place. Speaking of, Chuaning actually had that dream several more times afterwards, clear and vivid every time. He tried to struggle the first few times, but got used to it after a while and just let the Moran in the dream run his mouth like a lunatic, while he idly counted Moran's eyelashes out of pure boredom. 1, 2, 3. But that dream always ended abruptly at a certain critical moment. After many repeats of the same, Chu Dongshi decided that it must be due to his innately pure and noble disposition, that even fantasies didn't get too overly sordid. Having come to such a conclusion, Yu Heng Elder and his fragile glass maiden heart finally managed to retrieve a bit of dignity. But the combination of Moran and Loyalty Hall still gave Chuaning an intuitive sense of danger. Unfortunately, that young man hadn't the slightest about any of this. Seeing him, Moran's face lit up in a toothy smile. Shizun, you're back! Are you looking for Uncle? Aunt's feeling a little bit under the weather, so he's been over there taking care of her. What did you need? I'll let him know. Chuaning pressed his lips together and said mildly, "No need." Then immediately turned to leave. But Moran called out to him, "Shizun, please wait." What is it? He turned to look back as he spoke, but was unexpectedly met with Moran's extended hand brushing against his brow. Moran brushed a few times, saying like it was the most natural thing in the world, Look at you, you're covered in snow." Chuaning froze. At a loss for what to do, he stood frozen as the young man uttered fussily while dusting the snow off him, then took out a white handkerchief to dry his hair. Chuaning was no good with the cold. He couldn't be exposed to the cold, or he'll easily fall sick. But this person never knew to take care of himself. Last life, after he was imprisoned, he often liked to sit in the courtyard and watch the koi fish in the pond, unheeding even when it began to snow. So he caught colds and ran fevers all the time. Shizun was even more frail after his spiritual core was destroyed. He would be bedridden for at least half a month every time he got sick, and bowl after bowl of medicinal deconcoction had practically no effect. And so, when Moran saw him covered in snow, half melted, half frozen, he reflexively started brushing the snow off of him. But halfway through drying his hair, he belatedly realized that his actions might have been a little too intimate. His head snapped up just in time to come face to face with a pair of reticent phoenix eyes. Chuaning was glaring at him. Glare. Moran's hands withdrew sheepishly. Ahaha, this disciple overstepped his boundaries. Shizun can dry himself, of course. He can dry himself off, of course. Chuaning was quite relieved that he backed off. That dream was just a dream after all. His disciple was still the same as before, nothing like that guy in his dream who referred to himself as this venerable one. Chuaning was silent for a while before taking the preferred handkerchief from Moran. He took off his cape and walked over to the fire to warm his hands, then wiped off the melting snow on his hair. Since when did you finally learn what boundaries were? Face lit up by the warm light of the fire, he glanced sideways at Moran through narrowed eyes. Haven't you always been oblivious to such things? ... Shizun, you think so lowly of me. Neither spoke for a moment. Chuaning finished drying his hair and absent-mindedly tucked the handkerchief away, then shot an impassive glance at Moran. Anyway, what are you doing here? Moran hurriedly replied, It's the end of the year! There's a year's worth of files that need to be organized, so I'm helping... Chuaning cut him off. I know the files need to be organized, but isn't that Xi Mingjing's job? Why are you doing it? Moran. Shizun's memory is truly very impressive. Chuaning was totally unmoved by the flattery. Where is he? He said he was a little feverish and headachy this morning. Seeing the look in Chuaning's eyes, Moran hurriedly continued, Sorry, Shizun, I was the one who told him to get some rest, so please don't blame him. Such covering was like a sharp needle that pricked Chuaning and made his brows draw together. He was quiet for a while, then asked, "Is he okay?" Seeing that he didn't lay blame, Moran let out a breath of relief. "I gave him medicine and waited for him to fall asleep before leaving earlier. He just caught a cold. Should be fine in 2 or 3 days. Thank you for the concern, Shizun." "Who said I'm concerned about you lot? I was just asking." ... "Shizun, why are you so mean to us?" "I'll leave you to your organizing then." Chuaning left. Shisheng Peak forbid its disciples from doing each other's duties. Moran thought he was going to be punished by Shizun for sure, but Chuaning had unexpectedly let him off this easily. He stood in place dumbstruck for quite a while, and didn't react until Chuaning was already a distance away. Moran picked up the umbrella leaning against the door and ran after the lone figure in the snow. "Shizun! Shizun, wait!" Chuaning turned around. Moran came to a stop in front of him, shook the snow off the umbrella, and opened it above the two of them. "The snow's really coming down. Take the umbrella with you." Chuaning shot a glance at him. No need. Moran tried to hand the umbrella over, but Chuaning felt only irritation and refused to accept it. The umbrella fell in the back-and-forth struggle right as a wind picked up, and was blown several feet away. Chuaning stared at that umbrella planted in the snow. He stared for a while. This was such a non-issue. He wanted to just turn and leave indifferently as he always had in the past, but his feet refused to move. Just like how a candle will always go out in the end, and even an ancient well will dry up in time, even the most tolerant person will eventually break down. Chuaning turned with a sweep of his sleeve and said angrily, "Mo Wei Yu, can you just stop messing with me? I'm not Xi Mingjing. I don't need someone else to take care of me." A golden light gathered in his hand as he spoke, and Moran reflexively took a step backwards, thinking he was going to summon Tianwen for a whipping again. But instead, the light rose into the sky like a gushing spring of gold and formed into a resplendent barrier, blocking snow and wind alike. Moran, ... "Oh, a barrier for blocking rain and snow." Chuaning's expression was frigid, his brows even. "Do I look like I need an umbrella?" He seemed to be truly angry, the barrier rapidly changing colors with the movement of his fingertips, from gold to red, to purple, to blue, and then even green. The effect of the barrier changed with the color. One warded only against snow, one blocked the wind as well, and another even kept the inside of the barrier warm despite the freezing snowstorm. These techniques were quite powerful. Chuaning normally wouldn't waste his spiritual energy to block the snow this way. Such a sulkily showy display was so childish that Moran was rendered completely speechless for a moment. "Shizun, don't be angry." "Who said I'm angry?" Chuaning's face was pale from anger. "Get lost already." Okay, I'm getting lost." Moran glanced at the barrier. "Don't waste your energy like that though. Get lost." With a wave of Chuaning's hand, the spiritual energy forming the barrier suddenly gathered instead into a strike of lightning that landed right in front of Moran. Moran was just showing him some concern out of the kindness of his heart, but nearly got struck by lightning for it. He felt a bit resentful, and was just about to say something, but when he looked up, he saw Chuaning standing in the snow, face pale to match, but the rims of his eyes were a little red. Moran startled. You and I are merely master and disciple, nothing more than that. There's no need for any unnecessary concern between us, so take your umbrella and get lost." Moran started, understanding suddenly dawning on him. "Shizun, that day at the practice field, when I was talking with Shumei, did you hear?" But Chuaning said nothing, only turned to leave. Moran didn't call out to him this time, and he didn't turn to look back. A little ways away, Chuaning sneezed. His steps faltered. Then he put his head down and walked even faster, as if he was angry, but also as if he was running away. Moran stood in the snow the entire time, staring numbly at his back until he disappeared, lost in thought. Chuaning fell sick as soon as he got back to the Red Lotus Pavilion. He could use barriers to ward off snow and rain and snow, but he never bothered to when it came to himself, seeing it as a waste of spiritual energy. That's why, when it rained, He just used an oil paper umbrella like any other ordinary person. He sneezed a whole bunch, and the headache and fever were quick to follow as well. He was already used to self-medicating from all the times he got sick, and a little cold was nothing to even bat an eye at, so he took some medicine, washed up, and changed his clothes. Then burned into bed to sleep it off. Maybe it was due to the cold, but the nausea that had been cropping up ever since he got injured at Jincheng Lake was especially acute this night. The night went by in a hazy sleep, his entire body drenched in a cold sweat, but burning like a furnace. Chuaning didn't wake up until noon the next day. Blinking his eyes blurrily open, he laid there, spacing out for a while before slowly getting out of bed to put on shoes. He paused and stared. His boots seemed to have become quite a bit bigger overnight. He looked more carefully. Chuaning, ... Even Yu Heng Elder's composure couldn't handle this kind of shock. It wasn't that his boots had become bigger. Chuaning stared blankly at his hands, his legs, his bare feet, and the shoulder that his robe had slid off from. It was that he had become smaller? Author's notes. Mini theater. This is an edit from an old joke. Shuemeng, Mutt, I've got a quiz for you. What do you say when you see a frigid Shizun? Moran, Your Highness. Shuemeng, what do you say when you see an angry Shizun? Moran, Your Majesty. Shuemeng, what do you say when you see a Shizun that has shrunk in size? Moran, come, Gugu give you a smoochie. Shuemeng, failed, get lost. Aw, how cute. Oh, so this rhymes in Chinese. Your Highness is Diansha, Your Majesty, Bixia. Come, Gugu has a smoochie. Lai, Gugu qin yi. Lai, Gugu qin yi xia. Oh. Okay, that's the end of chapter 51. So, ever since Chuaning saw Moran and Shimei having that conversation, Chuaning has been actively avoiding Moran. And then for months, he's been avoiding him for months. And after a few months, one day, he's coming back from his job down the mountain, and he is not taking good care of himself because he catches a cold really easily, but he wasn't using an umbrella to shield himself from the snow and rain. So he happens to bump into Moran at Loyalty Hall, and Moran is like, Shizun, are you okay? You don't look so good. And Shizun's like, I know you don't like me. I know you only like Shimei. I don't need your pity. Get lost, mutt. And Moran's like, Shizun, don't be so fussy. He's trying to coax Chuaning, but Chuaning has too much pride to be coaxed, so he just kind of threw a fit, used up his spiritual energy, and still got a cold. Still caught a cold. But after catching a cold, the next day he wakes up and he seems to have shrunk. Now, what could that mean? Shizun has become a chibi. I actually remember, low-key, vaguely remember this scene from when I read this chapter the first time around. We'll be getting tiny little Chuaning for a few chapters, and I'm really excited. Xiaxini, I think was what he was called, right? Xiaxini. Oh, baby Chuaning. Oh, he's gonna be... I just can't wait for him to be, like, cuddled and, like, you know, pampered and stuff like that. Coddled, you know? So, hopefully we get to see a lot of cute, tiny Chuaning moments in the coming chapters. But that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed today's read-along, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye!